Hi and welcome back to a new video here on my channel. Today we will talk about some long-term personal notebook experiences. We have three devices here on my table. It's a Gigabyte Aero 15, which I used until like mid last year. We have a Thinkpad P14S. I've been using this one for about 9 months. And then we have an XMG Neo15. I've been using this one for about 6 months. And I just want to share my personal experience with these devices. For example, why I stopped using the Aero 15, why I started using the P14S, and what I like about the individual devices and what I don't like about them. Let's start off with the Gigabyte Aero 15. That's the device I used until like summer last year. And first of all, I really liked the device because just looking at the hardware specs, it's using a 10870H Intel Comet Lake 8-core CPU, 32 GB of memory. It's using a 3070 mobile, so just on paper, it's a very strong device. And also, if you use it for gaming, it's very solid, even nowadays. Even it's not the latest CPU anymore, it's still quite a nice thing just looking at the hardware specs. But then there are some aspects about this which just drove me nuts over the time. Starting off with the Gigabyte Control Center on this. I used like every single software version that was available, updated everything I could and like uninstalled and reinstalled, but this software just keeps crashing for no reason. And that is very annoying for different aspects, especially because the software itself is nice because you can adjust the CPU power limit, GPU power limit, and this use the cooling solution of the notebook more efficiently, depending on what you're doing right now. And you have different presets. So in this way, the software is actually quite nice. But for me, it just keeps crashing, and I don't know why. I never found out why it keeps crashing, but it's the way it is. At a certain point, I just stopped caring and decided to move on. And then one of the other main aspects for me, which is a thing I would never use again, is a webcam that's built in at the bottom of the screen. I have no idea who came up with the idea to build in a webcam at the bottom of the screen. Because then, if you have a video call, which is a thing that increased drastically over the last 2 years, it's always filming you from the bottom. And especially being a video creator, you know that the angle filming from the bottom is the worst you can use ever. That's the first thing. I mean, I don't really care about if I'm looking like beautiful in a video call. That's something I certainly don't care about. But if you look at your screen, for the other person, it always looks like you're not looking into the camera, which is really strange. And the position is like it's filming inside your nose. So it's definitely not nice. And one more thing is the display. I'm never going to use a glare display again. Especially if it's in summer and I have some sunlight shining into my living room and I'm sitting on the couch working with this. Yeah, you always have these annoying reflections, and that's something that's definitely not nice. One more thing is, especially also in summer, that's something I criticized before on different devices in the other way. But I made up my mind that it's actually quite cool if the backside is not made out of aluminum. Just from the feel, it feels really good. Like on this device, it's made out of aluminum. But if you use it in summer, and a device like this with the 3070 mobile and the Comet Lake CPU, it can certainly get quite warm. And you can feel that on your legs in a way which is not nice. And especially in summer, I had to use like a pillow in between the device and my legs to somehow be able to work because it's getting really warm. And that's something, yeah, I think using plastic on the back might be the better way. I want to highlight though that the build quality of the Aero 15 otherwise is quite good, it's quite decent. The case itself is very strong, the touchpad, even though I used it for a long time, doesn't look that much used. So that's a good sign. We have a good keyboard, the keyboard feel is nice, we have a full-size numpad. Also the case itself, because I'm a type of person, I don't really take care about the devices that much, I just use them, which typically leads in that the devices have a lot of scratches, but for the Aero 15, that was not really the case. So the materials that were used are very good. One thing I also learned from the Aero 15 is that when I'm, for example, on the road traveling, I don't always need that much of GPU power, and I also don't want to carry around a PSU which is heavy and which can also consume 230 watt. Not every device when you're traveling like a plane or a train will support that kind of power draw. So you might not even be able to use your PSU, or it might be extremely limited. And with a smaller one like this one, it only has a 65 watt PSU, it's quite tiny, it's quite light, and also the device is quite light. And what I also like about the ThinkPads in general, or like the Lenovo ThinkPad, I've owned multiple of these before, But they have a good selection of like different types of devices depending on what you're looking for, and then you can further configure them depending what you're looking for exactly. My main criteria to select the P14S was first of all the size with 14 inches and also the resolution of 4K. It's a matte display with 500 candela per square meter, so it's very bright. But I wanted to stick to 4K resolution mainly because I planned to use this for also creating graphics and also screen captures used for YouTube. And the native resolution for us is 4K. I didn't want to upscale, for example, from 1080p. And then I configured the P14S with the i7-1165G7, which is a 28 watt TDP 4-core Tiger Lake CPU, so it's fairly okay for everyday usage. It's not the strongest. And it's also using an NVIDIA T500 Quadro GPU, which is fine for like using Fusion 360 and like SolidWorks on a basic level. It's not a very fast GPU, which you can also see in this graph. In Times by Extreme GT1, for example, you're only getting about 4 FPS, which is mainly caused by the very low TDP of the unit set to 18 watt. Compare this to like a GTX 1650, which is using the same GPU. It's quite a lot slower, but it's still fine to use as a dedicated GPU in a device like this, as I said, for example, for SolidWorks. At that time, however, I was not aware that Lenovo and NVIDIA had like a patent conflict about H.264 and H.265. And when I purchased the device, H.264 and H.265 was disabled in BIOS. And I was not able to use any of this in like OBS, which was very annoying and slowed down everything to like 1 FPS, was absolutely unusable. This was fixed later on, but only like, I don't know, 3-4 months ago after a BIOS update. This codec thing was one of the main reasons, and also the not existing 3D performance of the P14S, because I also switched to the Neo15 as an addition from XMG, but we will get to that device in a second. Let's talk about the P14S again and what I like and especially what I dislike about it. The display itself with the 4K and 500 candela per square meter is very nice. It's very sharp and it's very bright, especially if you're sitting outside. With the 500 candela, it's very bright. But then it's using some very weird like energy saving modes, which are enabled by default. I had to dig into the Intel driver to find how you can disable this like energy efficient display thing, and figured out that if you disable this, it's much better. For example, if you use Discord, which is quite dark for me, and then I switch to Excel, which is very bright. There is some kind of like dimming going on, and if you switch from something really dark to something really bright, there is no contrast anymore whatsoever. You can almost not read anything. That's something which is not cool, and it takes like 10 to 15 seconds until the contrast is back. That's why I decided to disable this energy saving mode, because this is something that annoys me so much I cannot use this on a daily basis. The webcam position is much better than on the Aero 15. But that's also something I don't get. Like even 2021 and 2022, the webcam quality on like 99% of the notebooks is still garbage. Especially if it's a little bit darker, the webcam image quality is instantly bad. They're still using like 720p, like very high ISO webcams. Not great, not great. The weight is nice, the size overall is very good, it's very light. But then the materials it's made of first feel quite good, but after, and this is only like 8-9 months old, it already looks completely worn out. It completely looks like garbage on the top side. I will show you that in a second. There's one more thing which seems to be a current like issue with a lot of ThinkPads, and that's the touchpad. Whenever my device wakes up from sleep, then the touchpad is not working for like 2 or 3 minutes, maybe sometimes even 4 minutes. And that's very annoying, and that's only driver related. Because if you use a Bluetooth mouse, you go to Device Manager, you can see that when it comes out of the sleep mode that the touchpad is gone. And it takes like 3-4 minutes to come back. And that's for sure some kind of weird driver sleep issue. There seem to be some solutions that are working for some people. I tried everything that I could find online, and nothing of those solutions are working for me. I emailed Lenovo support 3 times and they never replied, which is great considering that I paid like 2,000 euro for this. Thank you very much, Lenovo, for no support whatsoever. I still like the device, and whenever it comes out of sleep mode, I either have to wait a little bit or I'm just using the little track knob which is sitting in the center of the keyboard because this one is working. And luckily the buttons above the trackpad are also working. So at least this is okay. And most of the time I'm also using a Bluetooth mouse, so it's not that much of a big deal. But considering the price, it's something that's actually not really acceptable. The keyboard and the writing on the keyboard after 8 to 9 months I think is okay. It's used in a way that's acceptable. If you look at the touchpad, you can already see that it has been used quite a lot. It's in a state which is still kind of acceptable, but I've seen it better on the Aero 15 and especially also on the XMG notebook. Now looking at the top part, that is the main part where I don't get what kind of weird and shitty material they're using. It has so many scratches after this short time period, and I mean, I don't even know where they come from, but it seems to be extremely sensitive to any kind of scratches. Not sure why they picked this strange material. Unfortunately, it's also not possible to use any kind of custom fan curves, modify power profiles, even use XTU. Stock, you cannot even install XTU from Intel because it's just blocked artificially from Intel, thanks for nothing. And the thing is, typically, you can still do something about the battery runtime by undervolting and everything. That's something I always used to do on those kind of devices. But now that it's just artificially blocked on a nowadays Thinkpad, you cannot really do anything anymore. You can still use the Thinkpad fan control from 10 years ago. It's still usable to some degree, but it's also not working that great. So that's something which is not so nice about the Thinkpad. That is the thing which is probably the best about the Neo15. That's something I just like so much about this device. XMG Neo15, and just looking at the specs, this is already a lot more fun than the previous devices. It's using a WQHD monitor with 165 Hz. That alone, in combination with the RTX 3080 laptop, makes it a lot more fun for gaming. Looking at 3D Mark times by Extreme GT1 performance, at the bottom you see the very slow T500 in the P14S with 5 FPS. And above with about 30 FPS you see the RTX 3070 Mobile in the Aero 15. And then the second from top is the RTX 3080 laptop in the XMG Neo15, which I have on my table right here. Almost 35 FPS, and that is faster than an RTX 2080 desktop. And that's a region where it's a lot of fun for a mobile device. The rest of the specs is what I would assume for myself like a minimum criteria for a nowadays notebook, because I want to always have 32 GB of memory at least and a 1 TB NVMe drive, which is what you can find in here. And it's also using a full-size Ethernet connector, which is also important for me. And also full-size numpad, similar to what I had on the Aero 15 before. But I think let's just take a look into the BIOS. This is very interesting. Already at power up. Thanks a lot to Prema for putting my logo in there. It's even reading the Bauer edition. That is really awesome. But the very impressive and absolutely unique feature is the submenu. First of all, we have extreme tuning features. You can enable overclocking, which then allows, you could for example also adjust the B clock, which is something I didn't do. But if you go to processor, and then you can also set an undervolting, which in my case is 20 millivolt. It's not that much. Stock, I could also use -45. But then I decided to try a basic overclocking, which is something you can do if you go to the overclocking and performance and then CPU performance submenu, configure turbo ratios. And as you can see, I set the turbo ratios to 45 for 8, 7, 6 and 5 cores. Stock, this is 42. So now for multi-core, my clock increased from 42 to 45 by 300 MHz while having an undervolting of 20 millivolt. That is absolutely amazing. Even though the BIOS settings are absolutely amazing with the Neo15, there are certainly also aspects we should talk about. For example, the touchpad. To me, it requires a lot of pressure to get some kind of feedback, and I personally also prefer if there are physical buttons for left and right mouse click available in addition. The webcam quality should certainly be optimized, even though I'm not sure what kind of webcams are available on the market to further improve this. And what I also don't really like that much is the software. But this also seems to be something which is a general issue of our industry, because no matter if it's like RGB software, if it's a mainboard software or a notebook software, they often have issues. The control center is the software I'm using from XMG. That's also the thing I had the most trouble with, especially moving in November from Windows 10 to Windows 11. It didn't work at all. I had to do like a BIOS flash and everything, but it's pretty well documented online, so it was okay. It was not nice to have these kind of issues, but it was okay. Now, even though this is like German right now, but for example, if I go to manual profile, I can set all kind of like power limits and adjust the undervolt, which in my case is set from BIOS. But you can see if I move this from like minus 20 millivolt to minus 18, there is no like apply button, for example. That's something I'm completely missing. You never know, are these settings like instantly applied? Are they applied after reboot? How do I apply these settings? That's something I find personally pretty strange, because there's no apply button. What I very much like though is the fact that you can set your custom fan curve for both CPU and GPU fan. That's amazing. If you go to the performance profiles, you can set like balanced, enthusiast, overboost. You can select different types of profiles, but you never really know, like if you apply something, what do you actually apply and how do you apply it and if it's applied? Because again, there is no apply button. And I'm missing like a table which is comparing the different profiles and like maybe display on the right what kind of settings you're applying right now. Overall, if I compare the Neo15 with the P14S, the Neo15 was much smoother, like almost no software issues, just those few things with the control center which could be improved, but overall much smoother than the Lenovo notebook. And right now actually I'm wondering if this video might get a little bit long, but we still have to open this up. Looking at the build quality, this has been used for the same time period as the P14S. It's much better on the touchpad, almost no usage at all, like nothing on the keyboard at all. That's pretty awesome, looks almost like new. Everything on the case looks pretty okay to me. Also on the back, like no deep scratches or anything, because it's also completely different material than what is used on the P14S. And also on the back, this is just the typical wear after like more than half a year, but that's completely okay in my eyes and something I would absolutely expect. Inside the Neo15, very clean, very easy to find the components. We have the battery already removed, the connectors, so we can also play around with some of the stuff inside. We have a 980 Pro 1 terabyte. We have two DIMMs right here, which can be replaced, obviously. Right now it's 16 GB each with 3200 megahertz. Wi-Fi module, speakers right here. Should be the GPU area, should be the CPU area. I'm very curious what we can find underneath right here. This looks awesome, exactly the way it should look like whenever liquid metal is applied to a mobile CPU. We can see everything is still liquid, and we can also see the heatsink was correctly nickel plated. We have some kind of foam ring that seals off the CPU. You can also see that by the spill around the CPU, which is not really a spill because it's exactly in the area it's supposed to be. Everything is still liquid, everything in a perfect state, which also explains why the temperatures are still awesome. You can see the 3080 mobile surrounded by the memory, VRM for the GPU, VRM for the CPU. That is made very well. Now it's time to draw a conclusion about my complaint video. The P14S I paid about 2,000 euro for, which is definitely too much considering the lack of support not existing, the issues I have with software and touchpad, and also the overall build quality with the surface finish, which is not great considering that it's not even 1 year old. Would probably not buy again. Maybe I would buy it for like half the price. That would probably be okay, but for 2,000 euro, it's not good enough. The Neo15, paying 2,800 euro for, definitely justified, definitely worth the price, especially with the Prema mod. And that will certainly be a question from your side if this is going to be publicly available. Right now, the Prema mod is not publicly available. I think right now XMG is evaluating if they will make it public or not. I can just recommend to do so because this is an amazing thing. That's something every laptop, like enthusiast laptop, should have, with like the ability to adjust power target, to undervolts, to adjust the turbo settings and everything. Just amazing. Overall build quality great, much better after 8 months than this. So I would definitely prefer the Neo15 over the P14S every single day, even though it's completely different like category of notebooks. The price is not that much different and the build quality is like from a different planet. Okay, I hope you enjoyed my notebook update video for my personal experience from the last 12 months. For 2022, I will probably not update my notebooks right now. I'm very satisfied with the performance I have if I'm on the road. P14S is still fine, and whenever I'm doing anything different, the Neo15 is exactly what I would ask for. Even though the new generation from Intel is very promising with P&E cores, it's definitely interesting, but I think I'm going to skip at least one generation. So probably no notebook update for me personally for 2022. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time. Bye bye.